Ladies and gentlemen, we start with the hidden revolution. Every age believes it understands the world in which it lives. It gives names to its inventions, it celebrates its discoveries, it congratulates itself for having reached a new summit of civilization. And yet, history teaches a humbling lesson. The men and women who lived through a great transformation are rarely the ones who understand it. The citizens of ancient Rome did not know they were witnessing the slow death of the Republic. The first workers who entered the textile mills of Manchester did not believe they were inaugurating industrial revolution. They thought they were simply looking for work. History often disguises itself as ordinary life. Perhaps the same is true of us. Every morning we wake, unlock our phones, answer emails, search for information, ask questions of artificial intelligence, generate text, images, and ideas. These actions appear trivial, disconnected, almost invisible. Yet history has often hidden itself inside such ordinary gestures. For what appears to be a technological revolution may, in fact, be something far more profound. We are repeatedly and repeatedly told that we are entering the age of artificial intelligence. Governments speak of innovation, corporations speak of productivity, investors speak of opportunity. Journalists ask which profession will disappear and which new skills we must acquire. These are understandable questions, but they are not the first questions. They assume that the central fact of our age is the machine. I invite you today to consider another possibility. What if the machine is not the historical event? What if it is only the visible expression of a deeper transformation that has already begun? For history has never been driven by machines alone. The steam engine did not create industrial society by itself. Electricity did not reorganize the economy by itself. The computer did not invent globalization. Technologies become revolutionary only when they enter new relation of production. Only when they reorganize the way society produces, distributes, and appropriates wealth. That is where history moves. And that, I believe, is where our attention should move today. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to begin not with artificial intelligence, but with a question. Who is producing intelligence? The obvious answer seems simple: the engineers, the programmers, the great technology companies. But consider your own day. Consider your own day. Every message you write, every search you perform, every correction you make to an AI generated answer, every photograph you upload, every article you publish, every conversation you have online, each appears to be an isolated act. Yet together they form something much greater. They become the living material from which digital intelligence continually develops. This is the first proposition I ask you to consider. The productive activity of society has escaped the traditional factory. I repeat that. The productive activity of society has escaped the traditional factory. We no longer, no longer leave society in order to produce. Society has increasingly become the place of production. This is why I describe our emerging condition as the immaterial factory. Not because factories have disappeared, they have not. Steel is still made, cars are still assembled, food is still cultivated. But alongside those familiar forms of production, another has emerged. Its principal raw material is not iron, not coal, not oil. Its raw material is organized human intelligence. Organized human intelligence. And unlike previous productive systems, this one is nourished continuously by the ordinary activities of billions of people. This changes everything because the decisive question is no longer simply how wealth is produced, it is who owns the productive infrastructure through which intelligence itself is organized. Ladies and gentlemen, here we encounter a remarkable paradox. Never before has so much knowledge been produced collectively. Never before have so many people contributed, knowingly or unknowingly, to the creation of digital intelligence. And yet, never before has such an extraordinary concentration of cognitive infrastructure existed in so few hands. A handful of corporations now own the platforms, the models, the computational resources, and the networks through which an increasing share of society's intellectual activity flows. This is often presented as the natural outcome of technological progress. I do not believe it is. History contains nothing natural about the organization of ownership. Every economic order has appeared inevitable while it lasted. None proved permanent. The question before us is therefore neither technological nor merely economic. It is historical. How did we arrive here? What social transformation has made this concentration possible? And what conception of society has persuaded us to regard it as simply the normal course of progress? These are the questions that have guided the writing of The Digital Ideology, my book. Today, I invite you to examine them with me, not as spectators of technological change, but as participants in one of the greatest historical transformations of the modern world. For if mistakes, if we mistake, okay, do you, if we mistake the visible machine for the invisible transformation that sustains it, we shall spend the coming decade debating its consequences while failing to understand the cause. I have a message here saying your internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me and see me? Just let me know. Can you? Anyway, history has never been kind to societies that confuse symptoms with structures. Let us therefore begin where every serious inquiry must begin, not by asking what artificial intelligence can do, but by asking what kind of society is quietly taking shape around it. So that brings us to the hidden transformation of our age. Ladies and gentlemen, every civilization tells itself a story. The story changes from one century to another, but its purpose remains the same. It explains why the world is as it is. The Middle Ages explained history through divine providence. The Enlightenment explained it through reason. The 19th century increasingly explains it through industry and economic development. Today, our civilization tells itself a different story. It tells us that we have entered the age of artificial intelligence. According to this narrative, history has acquired a new protagonist: the algorithm, the machine, the model. Everything else appears secondary. Politics becomes adaptation, education becomes retraining, labor becomes flexibility, citizens become users. Society itself seems to dissolve into technology. It is an elegant story. It is also profound misleading. For history has never been driven by machines. History has always been driven by the changing organization of production. Changing organization of production. This is the distinction we have almost forgotten. When we say the Industrial Revolution, we do not really mean the steam engine. Steam engines existed before Industrial Revolution transformed society. What changed history was not the invention itself. It was the new organization of labor, capital, and ownership that grew around it. The factory was not simply a building, it was a new social institution. It reorganized the time, it reorganized the cities, it reorganized the families, it reorganized politics. Eventually, it reorganized the entire world. The same mistake confronts us today. We are fascinated by machines. Meanwhile, a new social institution is quietly emerging before our eyes. That institution is what I've called the immaterial factory. Permit me to explain. For nearly two centuries, production required a separation. One traveled to the factory in order to produce. The workplace and society remained distinct spaces. When the working day ended, production largely ceased. Today, that distinction is dissolving. We carry the instruments of production in our pockets. Our conversation generates value. Our search generates value. Our corrections improve models. Our photographs become training material. Even our patterns of attention become economically significant. And this is not because someone forces us to produce. It is because production has become woven into the fabric of everyday life. The factory has not disappeared. It has expanded beyond its walls. This transformation changes the relationship between labor and society in a way that has a few historical precedents. The worker of the 19th century sold hours. The citizens of the 21st increasingly contributes fragments of cognition. Separately, those fragments appear insignificant. Together, they constitute one of the greatest productive resources ever assembled. Pay attention to that. This leads us to another historical development that receives remarkably little attention. The greatest fortunes of the industrial age were built upon ownership of physical infrastructure: railways, oil fields, steel mills, electrical grids. Today, the strategic infrastructure is increasingly cognitive. Data centers, computational networks, foundation models, global platforms. Whoever controls these infrastructures increasingly influences not only economic production, but also the circulation of knowledge itself. And this is why I believe the contemporary discussion remains trapped within the wrong vocabulary. We speak constantly of innovation, far less frequently do we speak of ownership. We celebrate technological progress, far less frequently do we examine the concentration of productive systems through which that progress is organized. Yet history has always insisted upon precisely that question. Who owns the means through which society produces its wealth? Today we must ask a parallel question. Who owns the means through which society increasingly produces intelligence? Ladies and gentlemen, this is where another concept becomes indispensable. More than a century ago, Karl Marx introduced the idea of the general intellect. By this, sorry, by this he meant something extraordinarily modern: the accumulated scientific, technical, and social knowledge created collectively across generations. I repeat, the general intellect is the accumulated scientific, technical, and social knowledge created collectively across generations. Karl Marx. No individual invents a language. No individual creates mathematics. No individual produces an entire scientific tradition. Knowledge is always social before it becomes individual. Every generation inherits it, contributes to it, transforms it, then passes it forward. Artificial intelligence has brought this old philosophical insight into an entirely new historical context. Its remarkable capacity do not emerge from computation alone. They emerge because computation has been combined with the accumulated intellectual achievements of humanity. Our books, our languages, our discoveries, our artistic traditions, our conversations, our questions. In other words, the intelligence displayed by these systems is not solely the achievement of engineering, it is also the organized expression of a collective inheritance. This observation changes the nature of the debate. The question is no longer simply whether AI is powerful. Clearly, it is. Not whether innovation deserves reward. Clearly, it does. The deeper question becomes one of political economy. How should a society organize ownership when the principal productive forces increasingly depends upon the accumulated cognitive activity of social itself? I repeat, because this question is fundamental. How should a society organize ownership when the principal productive force increasingly depends upon the accumulated cognitive activity of society itself? This is not a technical question. It is not even primarily an economic question. It is a historical question. Every great transformation eventually forces a civilization to reconsider institutions that once appeared self evident. The Industrial Revolution forced humanity to rethink labor. The democratic revolutions forced us to rethink sovereignty. The welfare state forced us to rethink social protection. The digital age now compels us to rethink intelligence itself, not intelligence as an individual possession, but intelligence as a productive force. And if intelligence has become productive, then the question of its ownership cannot remain invisible forever. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the hidden transformation of our age. Artificial intelligence is not simply giving us new tools, it is revealing that society itself has become the principal site of production. Society itself has become the principal site of production. The visible revolution is technological, the invisible revolution is historical. And history, as always, advances most rapidly when we still imagine that nothing fundamental has changed. Okay? So, the question now remains why digital ideology is truly an ideology. And I will come back after a break. We will deal with why digital ideology is truly an ideology.